Trying out something a little new today. I'm going to be reviewing 30 PS2 games in 30 minutes. These won't be super in-depth reviews, obviously, and just because I've covered the game here today doesn't mean I won't cover it in the future in more detail. I'd also like to warn you that the video quality isn't as good because for some reason I decided to use a different format for my videos today. With all that said, I hope you guys enjoy the video. People who are aware of my older work should recognise what this game is and who published it. D3 Publisher are the video gaming equivalent to The Asylum, you know, the people who make cheap knockoff movies to cash in on a really popular movie. Now these guys do that for games. There's sometimes, and I do mean very occasionally, they do come out with some of their own unique titles. These tend to be very hit and miss. Games like Earth Defense Force and Samurai Bikini Girl Squad are the good ones, believe it or not. Zombie vs Ambulance, while having probably one of the coolest names for video gaming ever, isn't necessarily one of their better ones. This game is distinctly average even for a budget game. And that's not to say this is a bad thing. It's still a pretty good game and probably still worth checking out. But like I said, they also do knockbusters. And I'm not sure that was the appropriate phrase, because now is Catfight. Yes, this is actually a copy of Konami's Rumble Roses series, where sweaty, scantily clad ladies duke it out with each other. This game is terrible. I'm not gonna lie, it's a really janky version of a game which wasn't all that great to begin with. I brought this game because I was on a big D3 Publisher kick at the time when I first started importing PS2 games. While this isn't the imported version, it's in fact Fighting Angels, the European version. The game is identical to the Japanese version because I had that too, and that's kind of terrible as well. Yeah, this is definitely one to avoid. I do like D3 Publishers games, but this game isn't great. But if you're a fan of the cheap and cheerful games that D3 Publisher make, you're in luck. This is Fighting AllStars. Yes, that's right, this is a crossover fighting game where D3 Publisher's biggest franchises duke it out. I am not making this up. That guy is from a game called the Yakuza. Yes, I know it's not a very originally titled name, and the guy on the left spamming loads and loads of weaponry, well, that happens to be the guy from EDF, I'm not even kidding. But yeah, this is a surprisingly good fighting game. It's a little stiff and a little tricky to pull off some of the moves, but you can actually have quite a lot of fun with this game. It's surprisingly well balanced too. I've not found any cheap ass characters in this game, which is very peculiar. You wouldn't think a game of this. Anyway, that Yakuza guy reminds me of another game actually I really like playing. This is called Yakuza. It's made by Sega and it's one of the few good games that they've actually made over the years. And I'm just going to warn you that the footage for this isn't going to look the best because, well, capturing any kind of footage of this game is a pain in the ass since it uses so much blurring and anti-aliasing. It's not even funny. But yeah, this game's a really good RPG. I know I'm just showing you the fighting bits right now. That's because this is only a minute long and I actually want to show you what the game is actually like. This game is definitely worth checking out, especially if you're a fan of Shenmue. Now, I know this isn't the continuation of the storyline, but this still does have all the same gameplay and is well worth checking out. This is probably one of my favourite PS2 RPGs because it just has such a great story, and the fighting system, while being a little bit ropey, is much better than most RPG fighting systems in all honesty. Sega! That reminds me of another game. Phantasy Star Universe. This game was a massive disappointment. Well, Yakuza series kind of came out of nowhere and I ended up enjoying it despite not knowing very much about this game. I was so hyped for this game, yet it turned out to be a massive disappointment. Sega learned nothing from the original Phantasy Star Universe games, and this is where they jumped the shark. Now you're probably wondering, why am I showing all FMV? Well, this is the most enjoyment I've had from the game. this FMV is probably the best bit. That may be me being a bit mean, but this game was too grindy. The character's story was terrible. I mean, I didn't want to play as Ethan Wabber or whatever his fucking name was. I just wish Sega would remake the original Phantasy Star games, or even Phantasy Star Online. But alas, we're never gonna get it. Another game I wish was remade is this game, Oni by Bunji. I love this game. Yeah, it looks a bit dated now, and that's because it was quite an early PS2 release. But this game was actually a fantastic brawling / shooting game, which was heavily inspired by the anime that was popular at the time, aka Ghost in the Shell, I suppose. The thing I liked most about this game, it was the evolution of your typical scrolling beat 'em up. You could switch between guns and beating the crap out of people with ease, and you could do quite a lot of really cool stuff, especially later on in the game when you start to learn a lot more new moves and the enemies got a lot smarter, so you had to think of how you're actually going to defeat them. Unfortunately, Bungie don't make games like this anymore. They're too busy pooping out first-person shooters, but if only they would make a new game of this, or even just remake this game. In fact, another game that I want a new game of is the Soul Reaver series, and this is Soul Reaver 2. And this is footage of me playing like an idiot. Anyway, this game is great. It kind of reminds me of a cross between Devil May Cry and Zelda. Like, this is your typical like explory dungeon hack and slash game, but you also get cool powers that you can use, and you can transform into certain things, and it's great. It really is great. Like, if Symphony of the Night was going to be done properly in 3D, this is what it would be, the Soul Reaver series. It also dawned on me as well, but the actual cutscenes and the voice acting of this game was very, very good. I'd strongly suggest checking it out if you've not seen it. Like, go check it out on YouTube or something, because it's fantastic. Anyway, another old ass RPG is this, Orphan, where you play as a Loanshark Sorcerer. No, I'm not making this up, and look at that voice acting.
You guys, catch up later.
Wow, you don't get voice acting like that anymore. Do you know what else you don't get in RPGs these days? Jumping puzzles. I'm not even kidding, there's even a jump button in this game. You can tell this game was an early PS2 game. And yeah, it's not a bad game. I kind of quite like it, despite its quirks. It's actually based on an anime apparently. But seriously, this jumping puzzle, infuriating, makes me want to punch people. Thank God for Urban Rain. This is probably one of my favourite multiplayer games on the PS2. It's effectively Streets of Rage, but it's made by the guys who did the Tekken series, who are renowned for silky smooth animation and quite weird character designs. But anyway, this game's really good. You can pick up weapons, you can jump off the walls, jump off each other, do crazy moves. This game's absolutely crazy, and the great thing about it is the multiplayer battles are kind of like chess, because the controls are really simple to understand, yet thanks to the dodge button, which allows you to move out of the way of oncoming attacks, you can counter your opponent's moves and do all sorts of good stuff. So this doesn't turn out just to be like a mindless button masher, but at the same time it's not so complicated that you need to remember a 50 million button combo just to pull off a special. Another game that I like that doesn't also require 50 million buttons to do a special is Super Dragon Ball Z, and this is probably my favourite Dragon Ball related fighting game. It's really weird because you can actually customize the characters and make them advance a skill tree and do all sorts of kind of crazy crap with them, and the graphics are very nice. It's got destroyable terrain as you've seen there, and yeah, I know Budokai Tenkaichi is supposed to be like the be-all end-all of Dragon Ball Z fighting games, but I didn't like the gameplay compared to this. The gameplay was designed by the same guy who did Street Fighter 2, not the first one, that was terrible. But yeah, I strongly suggest checking this game out if you're a Dragon Ball Z fan, because I think this game's slightly underrated as a fighting game. Another underrated gem, so to speak, is War of Monsters. I really like this game because it reminds me of SNK's King of the Monsters, and I love these kind of games. Definitely a lot better than Godzilla Save the Earth. That was terrible. In fact, these Godzilla games were a big disappointment actually. I know some people do like them, and I kind of do like them, but compared to this, I actually prefer this game better. Ooh, that must have hurt. The game controls like your typical shoot 'em up effectively. You move around with the sticks and you punch people using different buttons. I think the only problem I have with this game is the control is a little bit slippery on this game, but other than that, I really happen to like this game. It has a lot of class and style, and look at all these little people running about on the ground. That's awesome. This game actually made me feel that I was in a big monster movie more than any Godzilla game ever did. And speaking of beating up massive monsters, this is Jenga, and this is a weird one. This is kind of like a weird Taito take on the Devil May Cry series. It's absolutely bizarre. For a start, there's no title screen when you first load up the game. I'm not even kidding. You literally just get dumped straight into the game. I was actually going to show it to you guys, but the thing is, the entire process takes longer than a minute, so I couldn't do it. But as you're about to see here, this game actually isn't too bad. Combat wise and graphic wise, this game actually looks pretty cool. And is actually pretty cool. I've actually played this game quite a bit, and it's a very fun game. A fun little bit of trivia for you here is a J-pop singer called Gat is actually playing the main hero of this game, which is kind of a bit bizarre. Also, another kind of bizarre game is this game. It's called Hamara. It's a really good horizontal scrolling shoot 'em up, and if you're wondering why I suck at this game, it's because A, the game's kind of hard, and B, I've actually not played this game in some considerable time. But after replaying this game again for this video, I realised how much I love this game again. It's got a lot of class and a lot of style. The game itself has some good gameplay mechanics, like for example you can make your guy zip around the stage and slash at people and for big points, and you can also throw bombs, and you're generally made to fight massive bosses at the end of every level, you know, typical shooter stuff. I highly recommend this game if you're a fan of shooters actually, because I consider this one to be kind of a little bit underrated. This game rarely gets mentioned when it comes to like PlayStation 2 shooters, which is a shame. Another game that rarely ever gets mentioned is Demon Chaos. You know, Konami had this whole thing of 1 million troop. Well, they already made that game. It's called Demon Chaos. This game is amazing. Like, why the hell didn't they just make the sequel to this? This game's fantastic. It's set in feudal Japan, and basically you go around kicking the shit out of hundreds and hundreds of demons that are on screen at any one time. I mean, just look at it. You see all that wave in front of me? That's all enemies. This game is fantastic. It really gives games like Dynasty Warriors and Samurai Warriors a run for their money. A word of warning though, this game is actually pretty darn difficult. Like, even at the beginning stages, if you're not paying attention and if you don't do what the game is telling you to, you'll get your ass kicked very easily. Anyway, a game that's completely opposite to this is Kuri Kuri Mix. This is a cutesy cooperative puzzle platformer, and if you don't have 2 controllers or 2 people to play it with, effectively what you have to do is use the left stick and the L2 and L1 buttons to move the first guy around, and the R2 and R1 and the right stick to move the second character around. And it's actually a really interesting take on the platforming genre. It's really kind of interesting. I really like how bright and colourful the graphics are. It really makes seeing stuff really easy. One thing I'm not a massive fan of though is the sound. Like, the music and sound effects in this game kind of annoy me a bit. Hence the reason why I don't generally tend to play this game with the sound up. But if you're looking for a game to play with your loved ones, I strongly suggest this game. It's actually pretty good. Another game that has animals in it, but I wouldn't suggest playing with your loved ones, is Bloody Roar 4. This is actually a really... I guess Bloody Roar has now become a bit obscure because, well, they've not released a game in a while. And, well, it's a fighting game where the main gimmick is that you can turn into an animal and beat the shit out of each other. Well, the game premise is really interesting and actually has some pretty cool characters. I think the major problem with this game, the reason why people kind of stop buying them, is the fact that the character balance is so broken. I remember Long and Shenlong just basically being broken because they have an infinite combo which they can keep spamming, and that's a shame because I actually really like this game. And I like the series too, but unfortunately I don't think we're ever going to see a new version of this game because, well, Hudson have been a crapper these days. Another game that actually features monsters fighting each other is Duel Masters, a game that's based off a collectible card game actually. Duel Masters is a game that was developed by the guys who did Magic the Gathering. It's really popular, or it was in Japan anyway. This game on the other hand, well, better than most Yu-Gi-Oh games that were out at the time, and I do remember a lot of the early PS2 Yu-Gi-Oh games being a bit stinky. Today, now, playing it as I am, this game is really fucking slow paced. I mean I know it's supposed to be a collectible card game and everything, but damn, I was actually quite bored playing this, and I love collectible card games. I literally couldn't get into this. I'm sorry guys. Anyway, a game that I can get into, and actually happen to like quite a lot, is Driven to Destruction. Anyway, as you can no doubt probably tell, this is a Demolition Derby style game, and a really good one at that. You can even customize your cars by using a spray can and actually spraying shit onto your car, so you can spray on giant penises or whatever you like to do with your car. Anyway, there are tons of different types of cars, there are tons of different types of events and stadiums, and there's a really comprehensive and really fun career mode where you can actually obtain a whole fleet of cars, and eventually you have to get rid of cars because they become so battered that they no longer run properly anymore. And this is a really fun game. It's also very fun multiplayer too. Me and a few friends used to play this quite a bit when we were younger. In fact, most of the time my car would end up crunched up into a little ball. And speaking of little balls, we love Katamari. Yes, I absolutely love this game. And I know this game isn't exactly unheard of or anything, but I happen to really like this one. I know a lot of people prefer Katamari Damacy, but I actually like this one more, and I guess it's probably because I played it first, being that this game was actually released in Europe and Katamari Damacy wasn't. But hey, you know, what can you do? Anyway, for those who aren't uninitiated in what this game is, effectively you go around rolling up stuff to make a massive ball. No, really, that's it. And the bigger the ball you have, the bigger the stuff that you can roll up, so your ball is perpetually getting larger and larger and larger. The really unique graphics and sound really make the game though. Like, it's a really fun game, and I strongly suggest you check this game out. Another really fun game is Red Card. This game also doesn't take itself too seriously and is an arcadey soccer game where you get to basically fly kick dudes in the face, like that. This game reminds me of those old arcade games that were basically just batshit insane and didn't care about rules or logic or the fact that you could do super shots that would knock the goalkeeper 50 million miles out of the stadium. Red Card is basically the kind of soccer game I absolutely love, and that's a shame that they don't make more games like this anymore because, well, I think all sports games are getting a bit too serious now. Like, I can't play them anymore because they're aimed at proper sports fans. I just like to have a good little kick around and, you know, has some fun not having to remember like 50 million button combinations. And speaking of remembering 50 million button combinations, King of Fighters 11. I freaking love this game. Most people cite 98 or 2002 as their favourite, but no, this is my favourite. It has really nice graphics, a load of characters. The home version actually has even more characters than the arcade version because they added some home exclusive characters in there. There's also some rebalancing that they've done, although the Shion lady with the fucking long stick and instant hit fireball's still bent, but hey, never mind. This game was the sole reason why I couldn't actually get into the King of Fighters 12, because going from 11 to 12 you just see that, like, you know, 12 was missing a lot of charm and a lot of what made King of the Fighters King of the Fighters. And for me this is probably the definitive version of King of the Fighters. Well, this and King of Fighters 98 Ultimate Match, but whatever. Anyway, another really well animated and great looking game is Nomad Soul. This is one of the Nippon Ick games that rarely ever gets mentioned because it kind of was stealth released. I mean, some Nippon Ick people may go, yeah, I really like this game, but overall I think most people, when they think Nippon Ick, they think like Disgaea basically. And, you know, that's understandable. This game has some really interesting combat mechanics and has a really good story. This video, this little 1 minute clip really does not do it justice. Unfortunately my memory card was wiped with the actual save data from this game, so unfortunately I couldn't show you anything more interesting without having to play the game for about 10 hours, so unfortunately this game's pretty difficult to actually get a hard copy of because, well, it was rare and released in limited run, but if you can track down a cheap copy, definitely do so. Another game with absolutely gorgeous graphics is Odin Sphere. I love this game. It's a cross between a scrolling beat 'em up and an RPG effectively, kind of like Valkyrie Profile actually. But this game, wow, the graphics are amazing, there's tons of characters to play as, each with their own storyline, and it's really well animated. I think the only problem with this game is it's really grind happy. Like, if you want to beat the end boss, I mean the true end boss of this game, and actually see the ending, like the proper ending, you have to fucking grind for hours. And I think that's the only real criticism I can level against this game. Thankfully Vanillaware is still in business and still making great games even today. Another company I'm actually kind of grateful that is still making RPGs is Enix. This is Dragon Quest VIII, and if you've played any kind of RPG, you've probably known about this game for a while. This is easily the best traditional RPG on the PlayStation 2 in my opinion. I know that's probably going to get a few people angry, but this game is so charming and so lovely, and the gameplay's great, and the characters are awesome, and the storyline's fantastic. They didn't do much new with this game, but they rarely ever do with Dragon Quest games. But when they do make a Dragon Quest, they know what their fans want, and this is exactly what we needed. And look at this voice acting.
It's gonna get dark if we hang about here much longer.
That's amazing. So yeah, I strongly recommend checking this game out. Another high benchmark for the PS2 is this, Gradius 5. What a fantastic horizontal shoot 'em up. This wasn't actually made by Konami, it was actually made by Treasure, and even though it wasn't made by the original Gradius team or anything, it still feels very Gradius-like, despite the fact that bosses have multiple forms and stuff, which is a distinctly Treasure thing. But hey, you know, I'm still really happy with how this game actually turned out. It could have been a lot worse. But I think what I really like about this game most is the enemy and level design. It's fair. It doesn't feel cheap. Like, some of the stages from the earliest Gradius games were horrible. They had some really evil and nasty tricks that you'd only know about after you've played the game a shit ton. But that's not a bash on the Gradius series. Every shoot 'em up has that, and the Gradius series will always be one of my favourites shoot 'em up series. Another game that I would strongly recommend checking out if you like Konami's back catalogue is Steel Lancer Arena International. This game is fantastic. This was the sequel to a game on the original Xbox called Phantom Crash, where you'd control a giant robot who can turn invisible. Well, this game's exactly like that, but they fleshed out the story and the arenas a lot more, and the robots as well. Like, you've got like your little AI chip that actually talks to you and stuff like that. Most of them are in the form of an animal. Like, I've got like some kind of otter thing. They go, hey, you logged onto a target and stuff, and they all have their own little personalities. And the game's very kind of like futuristic-y, anime, Ghost in the Shell, like all cyber cities, and really weird. I strongly recommend checking this game out just to go through the campaign. It's great. A game I wouldn't suggest checking out is this. This is Dark Native Apostile, and I don't really have much to say about this game because I hate it, but check out this awful rapping.
Can't hold back, I lost control. Locked in the dungeon, must save my soul. Scream out loud as I face the beast. Never ever will I go down in the grave. Grenades on the set, you just lost your breath. The vision of darkness, a weapon of evil. Less than a man, not quite a machine. The ultimate warrior, the master plan and a madman scheme. All God was the mass destruction, created in my mind and will. All God was the mass destruction, designed to maim and kill.
Oh, and by the way, this game was made by Hudson, and this was their attempt to modernise Bomberman before Bomberman Act Zero. Anyway, on to another game that has explosions but doesn't suck. This is called Bombastic, and this also happens to be one of my favourite party games to play on the PlayStation 2. It's the sequel to Devil Dice, which is an old PS1 puzzle game. And explaining how this game works is pretty difficult, so bear with me. As you can see, there are dices that are exploding pretty much like the bombs from Bomberman. Well, to make the dices explode, you have to match faces of the dice together. For example, if you match 4 dices with the number 4 facing upwards together, then they'll all light up and they'll blow up after a certain amount of time. This game's absolutely frantic and has some really great replay value, because not only is there survival and versus mode, there's also a really good story mode in there too. Another kind of overlooked game is Baroque. Now, I know this game was on the Saturn, and a lot of people think the Saturn version is actually better, but I actually really like the PlayStation 2 version. This is basically a action roguelike. While you don't get to think out your turns and stuff because it's not turn-based, the game does have a lot of roguelike traits. For example, most of the stuff that you pick up is unidentified and you don't know what it does until either you use it or you get it identified by using an identification scroll. Also, dying is an important part of this game. When you die, you get sent right back to level 1 again, but it can also further the plot, so you won't just be able to run down through the dungeon and beat this game on your first run, and you probably won't either because it's a really hard game. But I do like it. Another really hard game that I also happen to like is Guitar Man. And god damn that fucking drum and bass shark. God damn him. Anyway, this is probably one of my favourite rhythm games. There's not really that much you can say about Guitar Man. I mean, it is just a rhythm game, but it's a really well done rhythm game with some charming characters and some really fun storyline. I think the closest thing to this really is Parappa the Rapper. I guess the only other thing I can say about this game is make sure you check this game out if you really like rhythm games, and yes, get the PS2 version and not the PSP version, because the nubstick on the PSP is terrible. Anyway, that's been 30 games in 30 minutes, so catch you guys later.